All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Complete Game Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Guerin. I'd like to apologize. We've gone a little bit over a week now without a podcast coming out. That's my bad. That's on me. It's been a little tough. Things are starting to open back up. People are starting to get busy, so I didn't really have a guest on this last Saturday. I'll try and right the ship. I'm trying to get somebody for this Saturday. Sorry about that. The Saturday ones rely on me getting somebody else on the podcast. So not having one last week and possibly not this week, that's on me. That's my bad. But we will be continuing today the division by division NFL fantasy football post NFL draft fantasy winners and losers. So far we've covered the AFC East, we've covered the AFC North, we've covered the AFC South. Today we will conclude the AFC with the AFC West. And going forward after today, we will be going into the NFC. And over the next few weeks, when we end up finishing the podcast for all the post-NFL draft winners and losers, we're going to go into some rookie stuff. I'm going to talk about rookie landing spots, rookies that could be good for fantasy this year coming up. And I really want to start putting out a lot of fantasy football content. It's almost July now. And once it gets to the end of July and early August, fantasy football really starts to heat up. And I want to develop some sort of fan base or some sort of listening audience that I can interact with and help. And I want to start doing some cool things. But in order to do those cool things, I need people to listen. So if you're listening to this, please share it with others. Please share it with whoever you can. Share it on social media. Text message it to your friends. And please subscribe or leave a 5-star rating or some sort of review. Those things all help. If you're sharing it, if you're liking it, if you're leaving 5 stars and reviewing, it only helps me. It helps the podcast. So please go ahead and do that. If you haven't yet already, to those that have, thank you very much. You're helping me out a ton. So today, AFC West, we're going to go through the post-NFL draft. So whose stock was helped and whose stock was hurt fantasy football-wise this year for 2020 and beyond. And we're just going to talk about what veterans were impacted like we have in the past 3 episodes. We're going to talk about what veterans were affected. And then, as I just said a few seconds ago, after these division by divisions are done, we're going to go ahead and talk about rookies for each division or each conference and talk about rookie landing spots that I like or don't like for fantasy football and how they impact everybody else too. So without further ado, we're going to start with the Denver Broncos in the AFC West. We're going to go alphabetical order. So Denver Broncos, we're going to start with the winners and then go to the losers after that. So starting out with Denver, Drew Lock, absolutely huge winner. Denver had one of the most fun drafts in the NFL this year to watch. During the draft, John Elway, the GM, said, we're going to put every single weapon we can around Drew Lock, their young quarterback, second rounder from last year. He didn't play too much last year. He did have some flashes. He had a huge game against the Vikings. He had a couple decent games there down the stretch at the end of the year for Denver. For Denver. So Drew Lock he's a huge winner, and Drew Lock this year in 2020, I'm a late round quarterback fantasy guy. I would rather draft my quarterback late and stock up on running backs and wide receivers. I'm considering drafting Drew Lock in like the last few rounds of my fantasy drafts this year. With all the weapons that they put around him in the draft, I really think he can be a decent fantasy quarterback. And if you're drafting him in the last round or the last few rounds and he still isn't good, even with all these weapons that they drafted for him, then so what? You drop him and you move on and you go on to someone else. There's plenty of other late round quarterback possibilities out there. There's plenty of other guys out there, and we'll go over that as the summer goes on. Who are some late round QB sleepers as far as that goes? But Drew Lock, draft him in the last few rounds of your draft. Stock up on upside running backs, high upside wide receivers, and then go ahead and grab Drew Lock probably late in your draft, maybe even as your second quarterback in your draft. I don't know if I trust him enough to draft him as my number one starting quarterback for fantasy for this year, but if you draft him as your second quarterback, draft him on your bench. Maybe just watch him play for the first couple weeks, and maybe these weapons that he got end up really elevating his game. And he could be a great late round addition to your fantasy team this year in 2020 just because of who they added. So they already have Cortland Sutton in place. Cortland Sutton, big, strong receiver, broke out last year, sophomore season, 1,100 yards. He's looking like one of the top young receivers in the league. He's a bully. He's a big guy. He had a great season last year in only his second year, and now he's going into his third season, and he looks like a young alpha receiver. He can play outside. He can win 50-50 balls. He can run a big route tree. He can do a lot of great things on the field, and he showed last year he can be a number one receiver in the NFL. And Drew Lock has him coming back. Drew Lock has Noah Fant coming back. Noah Fant is one of the most athletic tight ends we've seen coming out of the combine last year. He didn't do too much as a rookie, but he did have some huge plays. He's extremely fast for a tight end. He's a huge mismatch. He can make things happen. He's one of those guys, one of those few tight ends that can break away long runs because he's so athletic. So they have Fant coming back, Sutton and Fant, good duo last year. And with the draft this year, they only added to these weapons. They added Jerry Jeudy in the first round from Alabama. Jerry Jeudy, 1,300 yards as a sophomore, almost 1,200 more receiving yards as a junior. For those that don't follow the NFL draft, even those who aren't really into football that much probably have still heard of Jerry Jeudy. He was an Alabama guy. Alabama's right in your face every week in college football. Almost everyone who knows football is familiar with most Alabama football players. So Jeudy had 2 really great years at Alabama, 3 good years, and then these last 2 years he's been phenomenal. He's been fantastic. He's a great receiver, great route runner. He's going to get open. He's going to do a lot of great things in Denver, and he's only going to help Drew Lock because he's great at separating. He's great at getting open. And I personally, Jerry Jeudy, it's not really a great fantasy football fit for Denver, but for real life football for Drew Lock, it helps a ton. It's going to help Denver. It's going to help Drew Lock a ton. He's a polished receiver. He's going to run good routes, and he's probably going to be able to produce pretty much right away for the team because he's so polished. He was an Alabama guy. He has that coaching. And Jerry Jeudy was definitely a good pick for real football-wise and for Drew Lock fantasy-wise. Going forward, then Denver went right ahead. They drafted KJ Hamler from Penn State in the second round. KJ Hamler was projected to run like a 4.29 or low 4.3, somewhere in that range. So he was supposed to be really fast. He didn't end up running at the combine due to an injury. We don't have a pro day number for him due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think a pro day number ever came out for 40 time, but every single scout, everyone out there says, and you can see it on tape, that KJ Hamler is a dynamic player. He's got amazing speed. He had rushing attempts at Penn State. He's got rushing ability. They let him return kicks and punts. He had almost 800 receiving yards as a freshman in the Big Ten, which is impressive. That's awesome. 17, 18 years old, producing in the Big Ten, who has some of the best defenses in the league or in college football in the country. Hamler's got great speed. I don't see him getting a lot of targets right away, but he's definitely going to draw some attention by defenses just by how fast he is. He's going to take the top off defenses, open things up underneath for Drew Lock. He's gonna demand attention from safeties over the top, running go routes and things like that, and that's going to open things up underneath for Lock, maybe for Jeudy, maybe for Sutton, maybe for Fant. And a guy like that might not stuff the stat sheet, but he's going to help under the radar behind the scenes because he's going to open things up underneath in the intermediate to short areas when he's taking corners and safeties with him deep. So another great draft pick by them to help Drew Lock, their young quarterback. Next, they drafted Albert Okwuegbunam. I am sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the name. Not that many people do. Albert O is what we're going to call him. Tight end from Missouri. So Albert O, 6'6", 260 pounds, and he ran a 4.4 940-yard dash. That is absolutely ridiculous. unbelievable size-adjusted athleticism. That's unheard of. 260 pounds, running a 4.49. That's crazy. He lit the combine on fire. He turned everyone's heads. Everybody was looking at him after that. He was pretty good at Missouri. 400 yards, 11 touchdowns as a freshman, 43 receptions as a sophomore. He's huge and he's fast. He ran a great time, obviously. He's got some pretty good stats to go along with those traits. So Albert O, fantasy-wise, like I said, we're not really going into rookies that much today, but I don't really think he's going to push Fant very much in the first year, maybe somewhere down the line, maybe in the next few years. But as a rookie, I don't see him pushing Noah Fant right now. So Noah Fant owners, people drafting Noah Fant this year, don't worry about it for now. But another huge, fast tight end to go along with Fant is definitely going to help Drew Lock. They also got Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon, kind of a shell of what he once was, but he was still productive last year on the Chargers. Still a complete 3-down workhorse back. He's good in the run game. He can catch a little bit. Still a high quality back. He's no longer one of the best backs in the league, but he's definitely up there. He's still a really high quality back. I still like Melvin Gordon. Not as much in fantasy this year because of Phillip Lindsay. He could be good, which we will talk about in a couple minutes coming up, in a couple seconds actually. Melvin Gordon will help Drew Lock in the run game. He'll be able to dump the ball off to Melvin Gordon. He'll be able to dump it off to Phillip Lindsay. So that's just another weapon in the offense that can help Drew Lock. Then they went ahead. Denver drafted Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU, interior offensive lineman. They expect him to start at center right away. He could push for that center job right away as a rookie. So Denver went ahead. They added weapons. They upgraded the offensive line, and they're giving Drew Lock everything that he needs to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. So Drew Lock is a huge, huge winner from the NFL draft. Drew Lock could be the biggest winner in fantasy and could be the biggest winner in general for the NFL following the draft because of all the weapons they added around him, and they upgraded the offensive line, upgraded the run game. Just a quick note for Denver, Melvin Gordon could possibly be a fantasy winner. The odds aren't super high, but he could. There is a realistic scenario where Melvin Gordon is a fantasy football winner, and you're gonna say that's crazy. He left the Chargers where he was getting targets from Phillip Rivers, but I don't see Phillip Lindsay eating into Melvin Gordon's touches like Austin Eckler did. We've seen huge things from Eckler now. We know Eckler can take a screen pass or a dump off and take it to the house. Eckler does amazing things. And Phillip Lindsay's great too. No discrediting to Phillip Lindsay. But I definitely think, I really don't think that Lindsay is going to eat away at Gordon's touches like Eckler would eat away at Gordon's touches. So Gordon's not a huge winner because Lindsay is still there. But the Broncos did hire Pat Shurmur as their offensive coordinator. Pat Shurmur is known for elevating his running backs, dumping off to running backs. So keep an eye out for that. We could possibly see Lindsay as like the third down back and Gordon as the early down back. So don't call him a cut and dry winner right now. Just know that it's possible Melvin Gordon could be a winner if Pat Shurmur and the team do decide to use him more of a 3-down role and give him those dump offs and catches along with all the early down work. And like I just said, they upgraded the offensive line. Their offensive line's better, and their offensive line is arguably better than the Los Angeles Chargers. So Melvin Gordon could benefit in Denver. There is a chance. So if you are drafting him, if you're thinking about drafting him, there is a chance, there is a path to fantasy success and fantasy relevance this year for him. Don't expect like RB1 top tier running backs, but he can definitely be a solid running back if he doesn't let Phillip Lindsay eat away too much at his workload. Going forward from the Broncos, we're moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs. So fantasy football winners for the Chiefs, all wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, all receiving options, I should say. Sammy Watkins, Hill, Kelce, McCole Hardman. They all win. No receivers were drafted. All they did was draft a running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. So no receivers drafted. Nobody signed. So those guys are going to be back. They're going to be starting. McCole Hardman's definitely a fantasy winner here. He made some really huge plays happen last year. He's got 4.3 speed. He did some huge things as a rookie, made some huge plays happen. You could see him this year start to overtake Sammy Watkins as the number 2. Sammy Watkins is only getting older. Unfortunately, you heard that story, and if you didn't, go check it out. Sammy Watkins has been dealing with some things off the field in his career, and you could start to see Watkins get phased out a little bit more. You could see Hardman step up, play more snaps, get more targets this year. They could have Hill and Hardman on the field, both 4.2, 4.3 40-yard dash guys with unbelievable speed. We could see him start to overtake Sammy Watkins a little bit more this year, and probably even more next year going forward in 2021. So I like McCole Hardman, as a nice late round option actually. Not a lot of people are drafting him right now, I don't think, but I expect him to, as the season goes on, start eating away at Sammy Watkins' snaps and targets, and he could overtake him by the end of the year if Sammy Watkins continues to not produce that much in this offense. But other than that, nobody else is a huge winner. All the receivers, all the receiving options kind of stay put, same as last year. They're in a great spot, obviously, in KC. So those guys, no real upgrade, but they don't lose at all. They just stand pat, and keep an eye out for McCole Hardman going forward. Las Vegas Raiders. Yes, Las Vegas now. I didn't mess it up. They are Las Vegas now. So Las Vegas Raiders, huge winners. Derek Carr, huge winner. Derek Carr, they added so much around him like the Broncos did with Drew Lock. He now has a really impressive group of weapons, actually. Darren Waller broke out last year with 120 targets, 1,100 yards. Tyrell Williams runs a 4.3. Hunter Renfrow showed he can be a reliable option and get open in the slot. They drafted Henry Ruggs, who runs 4.2, unbelievable speed there. Brian Edwards they drafted, good all 4 years of college in the SEC, 6'3", 215, perfect size for an NFL receiver. They gave him rushing attempts at South Carolina in the SEC in college. He did some punt return stuff. He can high point balls. He can 50-50 balls. He can get open. He can run. He can do punts and kicks and all those things. And I love Brian Edwards a lot. So you have Ruggs added, Edwards added, and they added Lynn Bowden, one of the most dynamic players ever in the history of college football. Lynn Bowden, he's a receiver. He can run. He can play quarterback. He can do all sorts of things. He's one of the most dynamic players ever. You can line him up anywhere. We don't know what his speed is like from the combine, but based on what we saw in the college football season, him just running all over the place. I believe he was the leading rusher in the SEC this year in that division, in that conference, and he was playing quarterback because Kentucky, his college, didn't have a quarterback, and they just asked him to do it because he was their best player, and they just asked him to play quarterback, to put the ball in his hands every play. So they added him to. They also added Nelson Aguilar. Say what you want about him, but just another depth option. They added Jason Witten. They still have Zay Jones. So they have a ton of options there. They've surrounded Derek Carr with options now. And like Drew Lock, I actually like Derek Carr a little bit as a late round option. With all these weapons now, you could start to see him back towards I'm not saying he's going to put up an MVP type season like he did a few years ago, but he could start moving more towards those numbers and away from the bad numbers. Los Angeles Chargers winners. So Austin Eckler is a winner for the most part. He's not a huge winner, just a slight winner. They didn't add anybody too significant. So Austin Eckler will still be the starter there for the Chargers. But he doesn't win that much. I'm I'm staying away from Eckler this year in fantasy, and here's why. They drafted Joshua Kelly from UCLA in the 4th round. He's 5'11", 212, 4.5 speed, good agility, 23 bench reps, so he's got good strength. 2,000-yard seasons at UCLA, almost 40 catches in 2 years. He can do everything on the field. He transferred from an FCS school to UCLA and ended up earning the starting job. He had to sit out a year due to transfer rules, but after that transfer year, he immediately seized the starting role. Had two seasons over 1,000 yards right away in the Pac-12 for UCLA. He had 100 rushing yards in the Senior Bowl game. He was the North Team Senior Bowl Practice Player of the Week. Not that many people are high on Kelly. I'm drafting Kelly in every fantasy league this year. Every single one I'm in, I'm drafting Joshua Kelly. We know two running backs can be fantasy relevant in the Chargers offense. We've seen it for years on years on years. And Eckler is a smaller back. We did see him kind of handle a nice workload last year, but it does seem like, and the numbers from the last few years and what we've seen indicates that the Chargers like to run a 2-back system. And I think Joshua Kelly is going to earn the backup job right away over Justin Jackson. And I think Joshua Kelly is going to eat more into Eckler's workload and his fantasy production than people think. So I'm staying away from Eckler in fantasy in the late 1st round, early 2nd round. I'm not buying right now. Maybe if his ADP, average draft position, drops a little bit, I'll draft him. But right now I'm staying away from him because I'm a Joshua Kelly fan. Hunter Henry wins. No tight end competition there. Mike Williams is a winner. They did draft 2 receivers this year, Joe Reed from Virginia and KJ Hill from Ohio State. But neither of those guys will compete with Mike Williams in his role as the outside bully receiver who wins downfield and wins jump balls. They aren't going to do those things. So Mike Williams' role in the offense is secure. All right, now going into losers, headed back up to the top with the Broncos. So Broncos losers. Sutton doesn't lose too much. Cortland Sutton will not lose that much, but now he's got to share targets with Jeudy. Instead of seeing Sutton kind of dominate every week, you might see him have some off weeks now. You might see Jeudy have a big week. You might see Sutton have a big week, and they might kind of alternate and flip-flop. So Sutton might still put up the same numbers, but it might be a little bit more inconsistent now. Now he's got target competition, so he's not a huge loser. He's barely a loser at all, but you might see a little bit more inconsistent play where someone like Jeudy is having a big week and it's leaving Sutton behind. Hamler isn't much of a threat. He could actually help things, like I said earlier. Noah Fant likely doesn't lose in 2020, also like I said previously. But look out for Albert O just because he's so big and so fast in the future. But Noah Fant, draft him like normal. Don't discount him at all this year. Draft him like normal this year. I still like him as one of the big breakout tight end candidates for 2020. So Noah Fant, not a big loser right now, but could potentially be, he could lose some targets or some touchdowns or some big plays in the next few years, but not this year. Phillip Lindsay is definitely a huge loser because of the Melvin Gordon signing. I'm probably not drafting any of Phillip Lindsay this year. He's going to be a backup or just a satellite back. I'm not drafting him. Even if Melvin Gordon gets injured, we've seen from last year that even if Phillip Lindsay's the starting back, they're just going to split the touches 50-50 with Royce Freeman anyway. So I'm not drafting Lindsay at all because no matter what, he's either going to be a backup or in a timeshare. And lastly, Royce Freeman, huge loser. I love Royce Freeman. I'm a huge Royce Freeman guy. I hope he gets traded somewhere where he can play, but he's not going to be fantasy relevant this year unless he gets traded somewhere. They've moved on from him, it seems like. The only loser for the Kansas City Chiefs, Damian Williams. That's it because of the Clyde Edwards-Helaire draft pick. I'm actually a Damian Williams fan. He's like 220 pounds and runs like a 4.4, 4.45 or like a 4.5 or something like that. He's got really good speed for a guy that big. I like Damian Williams. If you watch the Super Bowl, if you watch the Chiefs down the stretch, he made some awesome plays happen when he was healthy. He was injured most of the year. I don't remember who it was against. He had like a 90-yard touchdown, ran down the sideline, broke a bunch of tackles. He's great in the passing game. He does a lot of cool things. He does a lot of great things. But he's undrafted. He doesn't have the draft capital. He doesn't have any draft capital. He's undrafted. And they went ahead and drafted Allaire in the first round this year. So my stance on Allaire right now as of June is I'm not really drafting Allaire because I do believe in Damian Williams. But as camp goes on, you could see Allaire just take over the job, or as the season goes on. But right now, early second round, I'm not really buying Allaire because I believe in Damian Williams. If you don't believe in Damian Williams at all, then go ahead and push the button on Allaire. I think eventually he's going to win the starting job. I think eventually it might take longer than people think or than the general fantasy community thinks right now. But it's likely that at least by halfway through the year or the end of the year, Allaire is just going to take over and catch so many passes in this offense. So Damian Williams is definitely a loser. Even though I hate to see it, I like Damian Williams. He was the Super Bowl hero, and he really helped the Chiefs get there down the stretch. But he's a big loser now because of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Going into the Raiders losers, so I'm not too worried about Jason Witten stealing anything from Darren Waller. He's old. He's kind of washed. I don't know why they signed him. Maybe they just want extra veteran presence and an extra tight end depth guy. I'm not worried about him stealing anything from Waller at all, but it's possible. I want to keep all options open. As a fantasy guy, I try to look at all options. I want to look at every side of things. So I have to say it that Witten could eat into something. Probably not. It's super unlikely that it would happen. I'm not worried about it at all. Keep drafting Waller where he's being drafted in leagues. I'm pretty sure he's going in like the middle rounds, 4, 5, 6, maybe even late third, depending on what league you're in or who loves tight ends in your league. But I have to say it's possible. It's definitely possible that Derek Carr might like the veteran Jason Witten, but I'm not worried about it right now, but it's definitely a possibility. Josh Jacobs is a huge loser because of the 2020 NFL Draft. He only got 27 targets last year. Now the Raiders signed Devontae Booker, known pretty much for only his pass-catching prowess. I hate Devontae Booker. He just steals targets away from good running backs like he's doing here. He did it in Denver for years. I hate Booker, but he's likely going to get some passing down work. And they also listed Lynn Bowden as a running back after the draft. So if Lynn Bowden's going to be getting work at running back, they're almost for certain going to give him some passing work and give him touches out of the backfield and do different things with him. So Josh Jacobs' passing down role and any targets he might get are now pretty much eliminated. On paper, we don't see him getting targets. And I'm not drafting anybody in the early second round who's not getting any passing work. I'm not drafting a running back that's not getting any passing work. So I'm staying away from Jacobs. And I don't know, Jacobs is a great player. At Alabama coming out, everybody said how great he was in the passing game, and he showed it at Alabama. And for some reason, the Raiders just aren't using him in the passing game. And it doesn't appear as though they're going to this year coming up either. So I'm not really drafting any Josh Jacobs unless I'm in a standard scoring league that's not PPR, points per reception. Tyrell Williams and Hunter Renfrow are likely losers here as well. Bowden and Bryan Edwards were both drafted in the third round. Ruggs was drafted in the first round. So you're seeing a little bit more of a youth movement here in Oakland. Drafting both those guys in the third round and Ruggs in the first round shows that they're kind of moving towards younger guys. Tyrell Williams, the veteran, likely going to get phased out eventually. I don't think he's going to right away because Bryan Edwards is a rookie. I don't think Bryan Edwards is going to challenge Tyrell Williams in the first probably half of the season. And maybe by the end half of the season, you'll see Edwards start taking snaps away from Tyrell Williams. Tyrell Williams isn't a guy you're drafting in fantasy at all this year. He's a loser. I think he's more of a loser in the second half of the year than he is at the beginning, but I'm not drafting him either way, even if he's still a starter for the first half of the year. And Renfro's a loser because last year Renfro was almost like the number 2 receiver when he was healthy. Now you're going to see him delegated to just like a slot role or probably not much more than just a slot guy or a slot role. Renfro will have some fantasy value this year if he's starting in the slot. He just takes a hit because I don't know if he's going to get as many targets with Ruggs, Tyrell, Edwards, and all those other guys around him. There's a lot of options in that passing game now, so I don't know how many targets there are to go around between all those guys. But Renfro is in his second year now. He does have rapport with Derek Carr now a little bit, and he showed some really encouraging things his rookie year after all his time at Clemson of us seeing him get open everywhere in college football. He pretty much did it again in the NFL. So even if he's a slot guy this year, he could be I'm probably not drafting him in fantasy either. He could be like a plug and play bye week fill-in kind of guy, or like a daily fantasy safe option kind of guy that's going to get you some catches and receptions every week. He could be a nice little slot option, especially with Ruggs, Tyrell, both fast guys, spreading the defense, taking the top off, taking those safeties with him, opening things up for Waller and Renfro underneath. So Renfro is a loser a little bit, but Renfro could probably give back some fantasy value this year. So don't pivot off of him just yet, but definitely I wouldn't say don't draft any Tyrell Williams this year because there's a youth movement in Oakland and they added a bunch of weapons, and Tyrell Williams is going to get phased out sooner rather than later. So finally we go to the Chargers losers. So Chargers losers, Justin Jackson, like I previously said, I love Joshua Kelly, the rookie. Joshua Kelly is like one of my favorite running backs in this class. He's not amazing, but he can do everything. He can run between the tackles, off the tackles. He can catch. He's got good size, above average speed, above average strength, above average agility. He's above average in every category. He doesn't excel in any one area, but he's above average in every category. So I love Joshua Kelly. I'm pushing the button on Joshua Kelly in the late rounds in all my leagues, whether it be I'll sit and wait for him to overtake Justin Jackson. I think it's going to happen right away in the preseason. We could see Kelly get some work early on, and then as the season goes on, see them more towards not a split backfield. Eckler's still going to be the lead guy, but you could see by halfway end of the year, Joshua Kelly start getting more work. And if he does supplant Jackson, which I think he will, as that second back, like I said earlier, the Chargers can have two backs relevant in fantasy at the same time. So if Kelly can kind of be that second back, I like him as a late round option, maybe another plug and play bye week kind of guy, a running back that can get some targets and some pass catching work. And if Eckler ever got injured or anything, I would think Kelly would step up and be the guy. But you don't have to listen to me. That's just my opinion. I love Joshua Kelly. I definitely think with the 4th round draft capital that he's going to but he's going to be over Justin Jackson on the depth chart right away. I think Justin Jackson is kind of done here, and I like Joshua Kelly. So so late round, some people like to draft handcuffs, the backup to the starter. So if you're one of those people looking to draft Justin Jackson this year, I would pivot towards Joshua Kelly and start drafting him in the late round of your drafts. Keenan Allen is a huge loser here. Some other people might not feel that way, but he loses that rapport with Phillip Rivers. He's not going to get 150 targets anymore from Tyrod Taylor. So I'm not really high on Keenan Allen. I was never that high on Keenan Allen anyway to begin with. He's not going to get as many targets this year. In case you didn't know, Keenan Allen runs like a 4.6. He's one of the slowest receivers in the league. He relies on separating, getting open, He relies on a heavy target load. Phillip Rivers just targeting him over and over and over again. He relied on that. And I'm not saying he's not going to be good in fantasy. He's still probably the number one option, the number one go-to option. But with a new quarterback, everything changes. We don't know. It's not fair, or it's like you can't just cut and dry say Keenan Allen is going to be the same receiver. He's going to be the number one. You don't know. Maybe Tyrod Taylor starts or Justin Herbert comes in late in the year, and maybe he likes Mike Williams more, or maybe he likes one of these new rookies more. Maybe he doesn't like Keenan Allen as much. So without Phillip Rivers, without that rapport and a new quarterback in town, we don't know how much of a hit Keenan Allen could take. But Keenan Allen's definitely taking a hit this year. So Tyrod Taylor, the most passing attempts he's ever had in a season was 436. And the least amount Phillip Rivers has ever had is 460. And that 460 was like one or twice in all the other seasons Phillip Rivers has played. He's been well over 500 passing attempt kind of guy. He whips the ball around. He's a gunslinger. He'll throw it all day long. Tyrod Taylor's not that guy. Tyrod Taylor's going to take the check down, short option. He's going to scramble. He's going to run. He's going to use his legs too. And because of that, the targets are going to go down for Keenan Allen. The targets might honestly not be the same for Mike Williams either. You could see Mike Williams and Keenan Allen kind of take a small fantasy hit here with Tyrod Taylor. Just because Tyrod Taylor is not going to pass the ball that much. They're going to be more of a running team. Another reason why I love Joshua Kelly that much, because if you have Tyrod Taylor not passing as much, then you're going to have more rushing attempts. And Anthony Lynn, the head coach, used to be a running back coach. So he's definitely going to feed his running backs this year, especially with Tyrod Taylor, who's not going to aggressively push the ball down the field. He's going to take the safe options. They have an excellent defense. They're gonna run Tyrod out there, be safe, and run the ball and let their defense do the work until Justin Herbert takes over. And when Justin Herbert takes over, it's a huge wild card. We have no idea how good or bad he's going to be. We have no idea who his favorite receivers are going to be. So right now, the Chargers passing game option, their options, mostly Allen and Williams, are going to take a small hit. Like I said, we don't really know. We don't know how much of a hit. We don't know if it's going to be a drastic hit where we just see Keenan Allen completely fall off the table. We don't know if Tyrod Taylor is going to give Mike Williams those 50-50 ball opportunities. We could see both of them drop off at the start of the year, and then Herbert takes over and they're great again. We have no idea. Those two guys are question marks right now with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback and even Justin Herbert at quarterback. Maybe Justin Herbert develops a rapport with Joe Reed and KJ Hill, these new rookies. Maybe he doesn't even like Williams or Keenan Allen. We don't know. That's the big thing. We don't know what's going to happen with the Chargers. We have no idea. So I'm kind of staying away from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams this year a little bit. If I am going to draft one of the two, I'm probably going to draft Mike Williams. He almost had like 1,000 yards last year, and he went so under the radar. Like he didn't even have he had big weeks, but he really didn't have like that great of a year, and he still almost had 1,000 yards. And I'm hoping he can break out this year, but I don't know with Tyrod Taylor. So I'm probably staying away from both of them this year. It's not a bad thing if you draft both of them. I wouldn't completely stay away from them. I would draft them in some leagues, but the upside's not there. The ceiling's definitely not there with Williams and Keenan Allen as long as Tyrod Taylor is starting at quarterback. Maybe if you see Justin Herbert is going to start, maybe you buy them in fantasy halfway through the year, or in Dynasty or whatever kind of league you're in. Maybe you go ahead and buy them halfway through the year when Tyrod Taylor, if he starts playing bad, and they turn the keys over to Justin Herbert, maybe you buy them halfway through the year. But right now, Tyrod's not going to throw the ball as much as Phillip Rivers. He's not going to throw the ball into tight windows. He's not going to make aggressive throws. So Keenan Allen and Mike Williams' ceilings are not high right now, and I don't even know if Keenan Allen has a high floor anymore. The big thing with the Chargers is that we don't know in the passing game. We have no idea And in fantasy, I kind of want to stay away from the unknown. So I'm staying away from what I don't know in fantasy, and I don't know what's going to happen there. So I consider Williams and Keenan Allen slightly losers for now until we see what Justin Herbert has to offer. So that concludes our AFC West post-NFL draft division breakdown, fantasy football winners and losers. So going forward now, we're going to start doing the NFC, starting with the NFC East. Thanks again for listening. Please look for the upcoming episodes for the NFC. Please listen to all the other previous episodes. Please listen to the interviews I've done with athletes. Those are awesome too. Please like the show, share it, review, give it 5 stars, as I said in the beginning. Thank you very much. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye. Take care. Be well. Stay safe.